Hello, I'm Susan Green, Associate Curator, Special Collections, Archives, and Research at the Philbrook Museum of Art, and I'm so glad you've joined me today for Curators at Home and Room of the Week. And today, for Room of the Week, we are not going to actually talk about a room. We're going to talk about a space. And to kind of give you a hint of the space that we're going to look at, I want to show you the front of Villa Philbrook. So Villa Philbrook, built in 1926-27 for Waite and Genevieve Phillips. This is the front facade, so the west side. You see we've got the front doorway, the entryway. Around this doorway, we've got this really bold, carved door frame, really architecturally impressive. There's a balustrade, and then there's this kind of frame around a window above it. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the upper level hallway and the stained glass window. So let's take a look at what it looked like when the Phillips family lived there. So this photograph's probably from the early 30s. This is our upper hall. It looks a lot different today. The upper hall is really kind of this transitional space between the family rooms and between the reception rooms downstairs. So down, if you went down the main stairways, you'd be in the great hall. It's big, it's formal, it's bold, carved columns, painted woodwork, painted ceilings. You come up, it's more intimate. It still has high ceilings, but lower than the Great Hall. It continues the painted plaster work of the Great Hall, but without all of that sort of excess decoration. We have columns, but they're quite subtle in comparison to the twisted columns in the Great Hall. And then the furniture, it is some of it is quite formal, so you feel like you need to sit up straight when you're sitting in them, but others kind of cushy. So this couch that's right in front, this sofa or settee, it looks like it's upholstered in velvet. There's a really lovely throw, kind of a satin on the back, so it feels comfy, like it'd be actually comfortable to sit in. So we've got this transition. There's a couple of things in this hallway that are Italian. So there's a chest in the middle of the hall. So where the stairway comes up right across from those stairs, that landing, is this big, impressive Italian chest of drawers, which we have in the collection. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful wood. Carved, the pulls are these carved faces. It's really glorious. And then at the end of the hall, there's this niche. It's surrounded by sort of a fabric frame with this drape and swag. And this sculpture is based on a really familiar, really famous sculpture by the artist Bernini, the Baroque artist Bernini. So he made this huge, larger-than-life sculpture of Apollo and Daphne. It's currently at the Villa Borghese in Rome. It's all twists and turns, and Daphne, she's a nymph that Apollo is chasing, and rather than succumb to Apollo, she turns into a laurel tree. So it's all about change and metamorphosis. So while the Italian chest of drawers is an antique, and the Phillips family probably may have bought that in Italy and shipped it to be part of Villa Philbrook's furnishings. We don't necessarily know about this sculpture. We know that it's a replica of Apollo and Daphne. It's smaller in size. Of course, the original's in the Villa Borghese, but it is, what I like to think is that the Phillips family, when they were traveling through Italy, they saw, they went to the Villa Borghese, they saw Apollo and Daphne, and they got a replica, a copy to take home so that to remind them of their time in Rome. That's my idea. But so we have things from Italy. It absolutely makes sense to have this little touch of Italy in the hall. Remember, Villa Philbrook is absolutely inspired by Italian Tuscan villas, this Italianate architecture of the villa. But it's also the home of an American family living in the sort of the West, if you will. And if you look closer to us in this historic image, there is a painting probably of the Rockies, but it definitely seems to be a scene of the West, this glorious mountain and a rushing mountain stream with the pines on either side. And if you look across, facing this painting, looking at this painting every day, is this wonderful sculpture of a head. And this may be a sculpture by Helen Jane Phillips Breckenridge. So Helen Jane was a sculptor. She had sculpted several works that were prominently featured in Villa Philbrook, and a couple of them we have in the Philbrook collection, actually. And they're lovely, they're expressive, and she several times created a portrait of family members. This seems to be her style, and it seems to be a portrait, and so I think it probably is a work by Helen Jane. And I like this idea of the images of the West and images of the family are here in the same space with these nods to Italy, nods to Europe. So we've got the past, we've got Europe, we've got the America as well, images of America. So this hall is also, I love the way it's decorated with rugs that are perfectly symmetrical. Everything is balanced on either side, but the rugs are kind of askew at the same time, giving energy to the space. So this space, it is absolutely decorated. It is meant to be a show-off space, but it is above the level that most guests would visit. But maybe your valued guests, your best friends might come up, go into your bedrooms, or use this space even as a sitting area. If there was a big party going on downstairs, this might be a space of respite to get out of the crowds. And so it kind of is, again, this transitional space between the formal spaces downstairs and the bedrooms. And this space, so let's look at what the space looks like today. So here we go. So this is the hall, the same angle. And there's a little bit of changes where our desk, where our Italian chest of drawers was, actually now that's a doorway. So in 1939, when the building became a museum, they broke down walls, they even moved doorways. So instead of 2 rooms, and these are actually the guest rooms in the center of the villa, they made it into 1 large room and now we have the doorway in the middle. And then the other big structural change in the hall that we can see today is this niche that had the replica of the Bernini sculpture. Now it is also a doorway. And this is a doorway into what's currently our contemporary craft gallery. This space, which is up just a little bit of a level, so there's a ramp, it is the space that was Mrs. Phillips's dressing room, closet, and bathroom, and then Mr. and Mrs. Phillips's shared sleeping space. And again, the hall is a transitional space between public and private. And I kind of like the idea that this hallway, which is nearly the whole, runs the whole axis of the center part of Villa Philbrook, it blocks off the Mrs. Phillips's dressing area and bathroom and their shared sleeping space. You could imagine that space is probably the most private in the entire villa. It is this shared space for Mr. and Mrs. Phillips, just for the two. The only way you can enter that space when the Phillipses lived there was through either Mr. Phillips's bedroom or Mrs. Phillips's bedroom. And so it's blocked off. It's blocked off from the public. But now, of course, the space, which has been a gallery since 1939, is open to the public. So if you were to flip the camera, turn around, this is what you would see today. Unfortunately, we don't have an image from this vantage point in our historic photograph collection, but this is what the hallway looks today. And I should say that the hallway currently is installed with the really amazing work by Eric Saul, who's a local artist. His work is really plays with abstraction, color, engagement. It has such a pow, and it is so much fun to have Eric's work in our upper hall. If you are looking down the hall, you can see one of Eric's large paintings, the very end. So this is another separate gallery. This round area with a green hat on the top. So Eric's painting that space, you have to go down a ramp, and then this large room is actually staff bedrooms. So it's the beginning of the staff bedrooms, I should say. So there were 8 staff bedrooms at Villa Philbrook, and that's even besides there were a couple of outbuildings which staff members could live in, even staff families could live in. But this is the beginning of the staff space on the upper level. So this hallway, which now is just a nice open arched space, when the Phillipses lived there, it was framed by a deep dramatic red damask fabric, red damask drapes. So you go through that doorway, go down a few steps, turn a corner, and then the bedrooms would begin. And on another edition of Room of the Week, I hope to really explore the staff spaces. I'll tell a little bit about the staff who lived and worked at Villa Philbrook, but it's an evolving process. We still don't know enough about who lived and worked at Philbrook. If you have stories or know of people who worked at Philbrook, we would love to know more about that. So please share your stories with us. We're investigating as hard as we can. But we do have, well, we don't have an image from this direction. We do have one other image of the upper hall, and that's this image. So it doesn't seem like it shows a lot, but it tells a lot to me. So this is a image from about 1928. It's an image that actually the architect, Edward Delk, had taken for his own portfolio, documenting kind of the lines of the villa. And it also tells us that it's really early because of what it doesn't show. So if you've been to Philbrook, you may know that we have 2 large tapestries that Mr. and Mrs. Phillips installed in the stairwell, one of which is still up today. And the tapestries aren't shown here. So it's kind of fun to see before the tapestries arrived. But if you look in the middle, that's what we're going to talk about, the stained glass window. So let's look at what it looks like today. So here is our balustrade, our main stairway, the stairwell. You can see in this kind of side wall currently is installed this gorgeous painting by Morse Lewis. It's a veil painting, one of his veil paintings. So he saturates a raw canvas with really thinned out paint to so that you can see the way the paint combines and overlaps, and again makes kind of a veil effect and the ripples of this paint. And a veil, of course, is also transitional. You can see through it, but not all the way. It's not completely translucent. So it's this liminal idea, and I think it's really perfect for this space. But let's look at the stained glass window. So here we go. Here's our stained glass window. So if you look at it, what we see, it is, of course, lots of colors, blues and oranges and reds, a little bit of green. In the center, near the top third, is a medallion, and inside the medallion are 3 figures. So there's a man sitting in red with a red kind of soft hat called a scholar's cap. And then there are also two women, one kind of in a purple and one in a green. And this grouping is meant to show Dante Alighieri, the poet and author. He was the author of the Divine Comedy, and also a later work, La Vita Nuova, which talked about it was his story of his encounters and inspiration from Beatrice Portinari. And she's the figure probably in the center, the woman almost in a kind of a purple and orange. And so as Dante recounted his story, when he was about 9, he met a young girl just younger than he was at a party, and she took his heart immediately. He was inspired by her. He fell deeply in love, and it wasn't just a physical love, it was a spiritual love. a true love. And he met her again. He was sitting sort of on a bridge or a street in Florence, and he saw her walking by with friends. And so that's the moment that we have depicted here. Here's Beatrice walking by. He's struck dumb with his love for Beatrice. And you can see he has kind of his finger in a book, and he is still just sitting there quiet and silent while she's walking by. And even though they both married other people and she died really young, he maintained that she was his sort of true spiritual love. And she is his guide in paradise, in the Divine Comedy, and then he tells his story of his love for her in La Vita Nuova. And she, again, represents this true, divine, eternal love. And I love the idea that Mr. and Mrs. Phillips requested specifically that their stained glass window represent Dante and Beatrice. It checks several boxes for them. It's Italian. It is literary, so Dante Alighieri, who is this renowned author, someone that we still read today. It also, he talks about or references language. So Dante is understood to have helped to codify Italian, the vernacular Italian, and also visual arts. So Dante and Beatrice images are depicted throughout the history of art, or at least European art. So it kind of says a lot about this this culture that they're wanting to depict, this story that they're wanting to craft about Villa Philbrook, and also the context of, or the narrative of Dante and Beatrice, this narrative of love, this inseparable love. They're not even separated by death. And so that love of the family. So one thing that I really also love about this window is the way in the evenings, because this is the west side of the house, the light streams in and you can see the flecks of color sort of reflected on the stairway, and they almost kind of dance. So I love looking at the window, but I also love looking at the light streaming through the window and how it plays upon the carpet on the stairs below. So it's everything about the window. So who made the window? So this window is made by DeCenzo Studios. So Mr. and Mrs. Phillips went to the best of the best. So Nicola DeCenzo was Italian. He studied in Philadelphia, went back to Italy, but then later immigrated permanently to the United States and lived and worked in Philadelphia. He set up the stained glass studio. He created windows with his son, Niccolo Goodwin. So Nicola DeCenzo, the elder, is standing. He was also a painter, so he's standing in front of his paintings here on the left. Then below is Nicola Goodwin DeCenzo, the son. He has a cigarette in his hand, and he's holding this kind of presentation drawing. And so together they managed the Nicola DeCenzo Studios, which created stained glass windows for the best of the best. For the Folger Library in Washington, D.C., a chapel at the National Cathedral, also in Washington, D.C., St. John the Divine, commercial establishments, wealthy homes. If you wanted the best, you went to DeCenzo Studios. And they, the father and son, worked with a group of craftspeople who assembled the windows for them from the drawings that the father and son created. So if you notice, Nicola Goodwin is holding this presentation drawing. Well, that kind of brings me to another twist in our story about our window. So a few years ago, I came upon, by happenstance, this object. So it's about maybe 15 by 12. It's not huge, but it has a large mat board, and then cut in and set into the mat board behind a window is about a 9 by 6 or 9 by 4, 9 by 5, 9 by 6 drawing, watercolor pen and ink drawing of a window. And there's a sticker at the top, and then there is written below the drawing of the window, French Residence, New York City, and then at the very bottom in the corner it says DeCenzo Studios, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and then a number. so like an inventory number. And as you can see from that image of Nicola Goodwin D'Asenzo, these are presentation drawings that the studio used. They would be the first idea of a window. You would show it to your client, then they would approve or ask for modifications, and then the window would be produced for installation in a building. So if you notice, we look at them side by side, this painting, rendering, this presentation drawing of the window is very similar. It really corresponds to our window of Dante and Beatrice. So there is this central medallion with sort of angel heads on either side, scrolls around. There's this kind of enigmatic man's head with a palmate crown shape crowning him. There's a frame with urns and acanthus leaves and swags, and then sort of this organic background. The presentation drawing is a little wider in proportion, and our window's a little bit narrower. And it's really pretty compelling to think about, could this be the original drawing, the original sketch to our for our Dante and Beatrice window? So if you remember the map board, the original map board that covered this presentation drawing said French residence, New York City. Well, not Phillips. New York is not Tulsa. But there's another little intriguing clue to our mystery. While this home, Philbrook, was built for Wait and Genevieve Phillips, they worked directly with someone who's essentially their consultant, their New York manager of all of the craftsmen, all of the furniture makers, the drapery makers. All of these objects were pretty much centered in New York, and that person is Percy W. French. And in my mind, my story of this sketch in this window is perhaps Percy French went to Nicola D'Asenzo and said, I would like to commission a window. I want the subject to be Dante and Beatrice, these kind of dimensions. Let me know what you have. And then they this D'Asenzo Studios came back with this sketch. They didn't know who the client was, so they wrote French residence. Percy French is based in New York City. They would not know Wait and Genevieve Phillips were based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, unless Percy French told them. If you look at the Nicola D'Asenzo archives, there are no residences for a family named French. There are no businesses under the name of French. There are no other windows with this motif, using Dante and Beatrice or this sort of central medallion motif. So while we can't definitively say that this sketch is the sketch for our window, it's really intriguing and it's really wonderful to sort of put this story together, what the possibilities might be. So that is a fun element of our window. But they didn't, the Phillips family and Percy French didn't only commission D'Asenzo Studios to do the Dante and Beatrice window. At Philbrook, we have a second window that's still extant, still installed by D'Asenzo Studios, and that is this small window. It's in the stairway down to our basement or lower level, right next to our armor, if you know where our armor is. So if you turn just right to the right, you'll see this little window. It's called the Hunt, and we are of two minds about this. So, and we've had scholars look at it, but we haven't decided yet exactly what this window is. It could be D'Asenzo Studios master craftspeople creating a window in the style of a medieval window. It also could be a portion of a medieval or an old window that's installed with these modern panes around them. So it could be made to look old, or it could be actually with old medieval elements within it. And so we're still working to determine which one is the case. No matter what it is, we love it, and it is absolutely part of Villa Philbrook's history. So while Villa Philbrook was being built, the Phillips family also built Villa Philmonte, and D'Asenzo Studios created at least 2 windows for Villa Philmonte as well. And so here they are. So on the right, you see a window a little bit similar to our small Hunt window, a small portion with modern panels around it. And then there's this large window at Villa Philmonte, also in the stairwell, the main stairwell. A totally different technique, style, and subject matter though. For us today, it's a little problematic. So the narrative of these sort of generic stereotype Native Americans with kind of cactus around them, looking at the Conestoga wagons or the settlers moving west. This is these Native Americans absolutely were not typical of the, were not representing actual individuals who lived in New Mexico, whether Puebloan or another tribe, so it is not accurate to that. And while Cimarron was kind of on the, or this area of New Mexico where Villa Philmonte was on the Santa Fe Trail. We don't know if this is what it really looked like, but it actually tells us a lot about the DeCenzo studios and what they thought the West looked like, what these artists living and working in Philadelphia thought. But despite the problematic narrative images, the window itself is beautiful with the clouds, the way the clouds are rendered, the way the mountains are rendered. It really is a beautiful, that portion is really beautiful. So Nicola DeCenzo is part of Villa Philbrook. It's part of the Phillips family history. It is a work of art accessioned into our collection, our windows. It is part of the art at Philbrook. And as you may know, the gardens are going to open soon at Villa Philbrook's. And as if that goes well and everyone is safe and healthy, we hope to soon open our galleries later this summer. And so we hope to see you walking down the hall, exploring all the nooks and crannies. And I hope to see you dancing in these kind of slivers of light that play upon our stairs. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today in our Room of the Week. I hope you've had a wonderful week, and I hope to see you soon. And if not in person, then next week when we explore our next Room of the Week. Thanks so much.